She threw away her education to become a glorified secretary. 4 years at Yale for what? To answer phones in some government basement. The teacup in my mother's hand trembled exactly once. I watched the amber liquid ripple against the porcelain. The good china, the set she only used when she wanted to remind everyone that the Ashfords came from something, that we had standards. I didn't flinch. I didn't correct her. I folded my napkin beside my untouched plate and let the silence do what silence does best, hold the weight of everything unsaid. My name is Penny Ashford. I'm 42 years old, and for the past 19 years, I've let my mother believe I answer phones. If you've ever been dismissed by someone who doesn't know a fraction of your story, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to see where this goes. The drive from Langley to my mother's brownstone in Georgetown takes 43 minutes without traffic. I've made that drive exactly 7 times in the past 5 years, twice for Christmas, once for her hip surgery, and 4 times when the guilt became heavy enough to override the exhaustion. Each time I told myself it would be different, each time I was wrong. The October air bit through my jacket as I climbed the steps to her front door. Outlet clothes, practical flats, a watch that cost $34 and told time just fine. I'd learned early that visible success invited questions, and questions invited lies. And lies in my line of work got people killed. So I dressed like someone who answered phones. The door swung open before I could knock. Penelope. My sister Victoria stood in the doorway, already immaculate in Chanel, her Yale ring catching the afternoon light. You came. She said it like a surprise, like an accusation. It's her 75th birthday, Vic. I didn't think you'd have time. With your consulting work. The pause was deliberate. The word consulting dripped with the same dismissal it had carried for 2 decades. Mothers in the sitting room, try not to upset her. I didn't respond. I stepped past her into the brownstone that smelled exactly as it always had, lemon polish, old books, and the particular kind of disappointment that clings to walls where expectations were never met. The sitting room was arranged like a stage set for the Margaret Ashford show. Fresh flowers on the mantel, the Steinway gleaming in the corner, sheet music positioned just so in case anyone needed reminding that culture lived here, and photographs, God, the photographs, covering every surface like a shrine to accomplishments I was never invited to join. Victoria's wedding, Victoria's PhD ceremony, Victoria accepting some fellowship in London, my brother Charles at his law firm partnership dinner, Charles with the senator, Charles with his perfect wife and his perfect children in their perfect matching sweaters. Not a single frame held my face. I'd stopped looking for myself on these walls years ago, but the absence still pressed against something old and tired inside my chest. My mother sat in her usual chair by the window, holding court. 75 years old, silver hair swept into a perfect chignon, wearing the kind of quiet elegance that came from old money and older certainty. Professor Emerita Margaret Ashford, 42 years teaching political science at Georgetown, author of 6 books on international relations, consultant to 3 presidential administrations. She had opinions about foreign policy. My mother, she had no idea her younger daughter had shaped more of it than her books ever would. Penelope! She offered her cheek for a kiss. I gave it. I wasn't sure you'd make it. Your schedule is always so unpredictable. I wouldn't miss it, Mother. That single sound carried a library of doubt. Well, sit. Victoria's arranged a lovely afternoon tea. Just family and a few colleagues from the department. I sat in the chair furthest from the center of the room, the chair that faced the door. Old habit. Couldn't break it if I tried. The guests filtered in over the next hour. Department heads, former students now tenured themselves, a retired ambassador who'd known my father. Each one greeted with warmth, with history, with a particular intimacy of shared intellectual accomplishment. Each one looked past me like I was furniture. Charles arrived late, phone pressed to his ear, radiating the particular energy of a man who billed $800 an hour and wanted everyone to know it. He nodded at me, a nod. That was what 19 years of holidays had reduced us to, a nod and the occasional question about parking. Victoria's husband Richard materialized with a gin and tonic he didn't offer to share. Penny, still in, what is it again? Government consulting? Something like that. He sipped his drink. Stable work, I suppose. Benefits. The word benefits contained entire worlds of condescension. I smiled. The smile I'd perfected in rooms far more dangerous than this one. The smile that gave nothing and took everything in. The benefits are adequate. He lost interest immediately. They always did. The boring sister, the one who'd thrown away a Yale education to shuffle papers in some windowless office, the family disappointment who couldn't even be interesting enough to fail spectacularly, just mediocre enough to ignore. The speeches started at 4 o'clock. Victoria went first. 10 minutes on Mother's impact on her career, her scholarship, her understanding of power structures in emerging democracies. Charles followed with a toast that managed to reference his partnership, his client list, and his membership at the Metropolitan Club within the first 3 sentences. Mother glowed. This was her element. This was the family she'd built. Successful, visible, impressive. Then her gaze drifted to me and the glow dimmed. And of course, Penelope is here. She said it like an afterthought, like a footnote to her own legacy. My youngest, she was always different. Different. The word she used when she meant less. 4 years at Yale. Mother shook her head slowly, performing regret for her audience. Top of her class in linguistics, fluent in, what was it, Penelope? 6 languages. 7 now. 7. She let the number hang there, then sighed, and she threw it all away to become a glorified secretary, some government job that requires a badge and apparently pays in parking vouchers. Soft laughter rippled through the room. Collegial, sympathetic, what a waste. I used to imagine she'd follow me into academia, or diplomacy perhaps. She had the mind for it. Mother lifted her teacup, the good china, the Ashford china, and took a delicate sip. But Penelope always preferred the path of least resistance. Isn't that right, dear? I didn't flinch. I stayed silent, my hands folded in my lap, my spine straight against the chair that faced the door. They didn't know. That path of least resistance included 2 years at Camp Peary, the facility that doesn't officially exist, the one intelligence officers call the farm. They didn't know that my fluency in Farsi had been tested in rooms where getting a verb tense wrong meant someone didn't come home. They didn't know about Tehran. They didn't know about any of it. And that was the point. That was always the point. Mother. Victoria's voice carried the particular sharpness of a daughter protecting a legacy. Let's not dwell on, I'm simply stating facts, Victoria. Penelope had every opportunity, every advantage, and she chose to waste them. Mother set her teacup down with a click that echoed. I've made my peace with it. She hadn't. She never would, but that wasn't the point either. I opened my mouth, not to defend myself, but to redirect when the doorbell rang, and everything shifted. Richard moved toward the door, still holding his gin and tonic like a prop. I heard murmured voices in the foyer, a pause, then Richard's voice, uncertain in a way I'd never heard from him. I'm sorry, who did you say you were with? The woman who stepped into the sitting room wore a charcoal suit that cost more than my mother's Steinway, silver hair cropped close, eyes that had seen briefing rooms and situation rooms and the kind of decisions that never made the newspapers. I recognized her immediately. Everyone in my world would. Director of National Intelligence Catherine Walsh stopped 3 feet inside the doorway and surveyed the room with the particular calm of someone who had just walked into a space she now owned completely. Her gaze found me, and then, impossible, unthinkable, she smiled. "Officer Ashford." My mother's teacup rattled against its saucer. "Ma'am." I rose slowly. Muscle memory. 19 years of protocol carved into my bones. I apologize for interrupting. Director Walsh's voice carried to every corner of the room. But the matter couldn't wait. She reached into her jacket and produced a slim folder, cream-colored, unmarked, the kind that never existed in any system. Penelope Ashford, Case Officer, Central Intelligence Agency, 19 years of distinguished service. Handler of the Tehran network that 18 months ago provided intelligence preventing a catastrophic strike on American assets in the Gulf. The room had gone absolutely still. The President of the United States sends his personal gratitude. My mother's hand trembled. The teacup slipped. Victoria caught it before it fell. But her eyes never left my face. Director Walsh stepped forward and extended her hand. I took it. "The work you've done, Officer Ashford, the lives you've saved, the crises you've averted will never be fully known. That's the nature of what we do." Her grip was firm, final. But I wanted your family to know. Their daughter didn't waste anything. She gave everything. Then Catherine Walsh, Director of National Intelligence, fourth in line to the presidency, the woman who briefed world leaders and shaped the invisible architecture of global security, turned to my mother and bowed her head. "Professor Ashford, your scholarship on regional power dynamics informed doctrine we still use today. You should know that your daughter took that foundation and built something extraordinary on it." She paused. "The apple didn't fall far. It just landed somewhere you couldn't see." My mother's mouth opened. No sound came out. I stood there in my outlet clothes and my $34 watch, 19 years of silence ringing in my ears, and I watched my mother try to find words that didn't exist. I should go. I picked up my coat from the chair that faced the door. "I have work in the morning." Victoria grabbed my arm. "Penny." "You didn't ask." I kept my voice even. Quiet. The way I'd kept it in rooms where quiet was the only weapon I had. "None of you ever asked." I walked toward the foyer. Director Walsh fell into step beside me. Behind us, the silence in that sitting room pressed down like a physical weight, heavy with photographs that would need to be rearranged with assumptions that had just crumbled, with the particular devastation of realizing you'd spent 2 decades pitying someone who'd been saving the world while you weren't watching. At the door, I paused. "Mother." She looked up. 75 years old, silver hair, all that certainty cracking at the edges. "Happy birthday." The October wind cut through Georgetown like a blade. I made it 6 steps down the brownstones' front stairs before the door burst open behind me. Footsteps, fast, expensive heels on old brick. "Penelope, stop!" Victoria's voice cracked on my name. I'd never heard it crack before. Not when Father died, not when her first marriage collapsed, not when anything in her perfect choreographed life slipped even slightly out of frame. I stopped. Director Walsh paused beside me, one eyebrow raised in a question only I could read. "Your call." I gave her the smallest nod. "I'll handle it." She continued toward the black SUV idling at the curb, already reaching for her phone. The woman had 17 ongoing crises at any given moment. My family drama barely registered as a footnote. I turned. Victoria stood on the top step, arms wrapped around herself, the Chanel jacket suddenly inadequate against something colder than weather. Behind her, silhouettes crowded the doorway. Charles, Richard, two of Mother's colleagues frozen mid-gape. And at the center, visible through the leaded glass, my mother hadn't moved from her chair. You can't just leave. Victoria descended one step, then another. You can't just... That woman, the director of... Penny, what the hell is happening? I told you. I have work. Work. She laughed, high, brittle, wrong. Work for 19 years. You let us think. You let Mother think. I let you believe what you wanted to believe. That's not fair. No. I adjusted my collar against the wind. It isn't. Richard appeared in the doorway, his gin and tonic abandoned somewhere, his face the particular shade of gray that came from watching your entire understanding of a person collapse in real time. Victoria let her go. This is clearly above our zeal. Don't. Victoria's voice went sharp. Don't you dare dismiss this. Don't you dare dismiss her. Not again. Something shifted behind my ribs, something I'd locked away so long ago I'd forgotten it was there, but I didn't let it show. I never let it show. Victoria, I kept my voice even. Go back inside. Take care of Mother. I'll call when I can. When you can. She wiped at her eyes. When had she started crying? Penny, I've spent 20 years watching Mother tear you apart at every holiday, every dinner, every single family gathering. I watched you sit there and take it. I thought you were just passive. I thought you'd given up. You thought what the cover required you to think. The cover, she said it like a foreign word. You mean we were part of you were never part of anything. I softened just slightly. That was the point. You were never supposed to know. None of you were supposed to know. Then why did that woman, Director Walsh, why did she come here? Why now? I glanced at the SUV. Director Walsh had finished her call. She was watching me through the tinted window with the patient assessment of someone who understood exactly what this moment cost. Because some debts come due. I turned back to my sister because I've given 19 years and I'm being moved to a position that requires different accommodations. And because someone decided my family deserved to know what their disappointment had been protecting them from. Victoria stared at me. Protecting us? Go inside, Vic. Penny, there's nothing more I can tell you. Not here, not now. Probably not ever. I started toward the SUV. Take care of Mother. I was reaching for the door handle when Richard's voice cut through the wind. This is absurd. I paused, didn't turn. You expect us to believe what exactly? That the family failure has been playing spy for 2 decades? He'd found his footing now, his courtroom voice swelling with the particular confidence of a man who'd never encountered a room he couldn't dominate. One woman shows up, flashes some credentials, and suddenly Penny's Jason Bourne. Please. Director Walsh's window lowered 3 inches, just enough for her voice to carry. Mr. Ashford, a word of advice. Richard stepped forward, chin lifted. I don't take advice from... The file I'm holding contains details of 6 operations your sister-in-law personally directed. 3 of them intersected with cases your firm handled for clients with significant overseas exposure. The director's voice remained absolutely level. I'd be very careful about which questions you ask next. Some answers have consequences your billable hours can't cover. Richard went pale. She's not Jason Bourne, Mr. Ashford. Jason Bourne is fiction. Your sister-in-law is something far more valuable. She's real, she's exceptional, and she's spent 19 years being invisible so that people like you could sleep at night, believing the world was simpler than it is. The window rose. I opened the door, slid into the leather interior, and didn't look back. The SUV pulled away from the curb in silence. I watched Georgetown slide past through tinted glass, the brownstones, the embassies, the particular architecture of old money and older secrets. This was the neighborhood I'd grown up in. The streets I'd walked as a child, dreaming of being someone who mattered. I just never imagined mattering would look like this. You didn't have to do that. I kept my eyes on the window, the reveal. You could have found another way. I could have. Director Walsh set the cream-colored folder on the seat between us. I chose not to. Why? Because you've given us 19 years, Penny. 19 years of silence, of watching your own mother diminish you in public while you protected her from truths that would have destroyed her understanding of the world. She paused. You deserved one moment where the silence broke in your favor. I didn't have a response for that. I wasn't sure one existed. The Tehran network, I said instead. That's not why you came. No. Then why? Director Walsh reached into her jacket and produced a second folder. This one was red. The color that meant eyes only, the color that meant someone's career or someone's life hung in the balance. Because we have a problem, Officer Ashford. And your particular skill set may be the only thing standing between us and a catastrophic intelligence failure. She opened the folder. I looked down at the photograph clipped to the first page and felt the blood drain from my face. Back in Georgetown, the sitting room had emptied of guests. Mother still hadn't moved from her chair by the window. The teacup sat abandoned on its saucer, cold now, the good china suddenly meaningless in a way it had never been before. Victoria stood in the doorway watching her. Mother, no response. Mother, the guests have gone. Charles is handling the... She let me. Mother's voice was barely a whisper. For 19 years, she let me believe. I know. I called her mediocre Victoria at her father's funeral. I told her she was the only one of my children who hadn't achieved anything worth mentioning. Mother's hands trembled in her lap. She stood at his graveside and listened to me say that, and she said nothing. Victoria crossed the room, slowly knelt beside her mother's chair. She couldn't say anything. You heard the director? It's classified. All of it. Whatever she's been doing, whoever she's been doing it for, she wasn't allowed to defend herself. But I'm her mother. The word cracked. I should have known. I should have seen... Seen what? Victoria took her mother's hands. She was doing her job, Mother. The whole point of her job was making sure no one saw anything. Mother closed her eyes. In the foyer, Richard was pacing. Charles stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and urgent. The retired ambassador had been the last to leave, and he'd walked out with a look on his face that Victoria would remember for years. The look of a man suddenly realizing how many classified briefings had referenced operations he'd never known were run by someone he'd shared Christmas dinner with. I need to see her. Mother's eyes opened. Something had shifted in them. The certainty was gone, replaced by something raw and unfamiliar. I need to talk to my daughter. She said she'd call when she could. That's not good enough. Mother, I've wasted 19 years, Victoria. Mother stood slowly, steadying herself on the arm of the chair. I've wasted 19 years being ashamed of the wrong daughter. The words hung in the air between them. Victoria absorbed the blow in silence. She'd spent 2 decades being the successful one, the accomplished one, the one who'd made Mother proud. And now... I didn't mean... Yes? Victoria stood. You did. She walked out of the room without looking back. The SUV stopped at a traffic light. I was still staring at the photograph in the red folder, still trying to make my lungs remember how to work. His name is Ahmad Rezai, Director Walsh said. 3 months ago, he was your primary asset in Tehran. Today, he's in a black site outside Erbil, claiming he has information about a mole inside American intelligence. Ahmad is dead. My voice sounded distant, foreign. He was killed in the extraction. I read the after-action report. You read what we needed you to read. I looked up. The extraction was compromised, Penny. Not failed, compromised. Someone on our side fed his location to Iranian intelligence. He survived, barely. went to ground for 90 days, and 3 weeks ago, he resurfaced with a name. She turned to a page deeper in the folder. My eyes found the highlighted text, and the world went sideways. Number 1. I shook my head. No, that's not possible. The source of the leak, it can't be. Your mother's book. Director Walsh's voice was gentle, precise, the voice of someone delivering news they knew would break something. Her 1994 analysis of power structures in post-revolutionary Iran, specifically the chapter on informal intelligence networks within the IRGC. That's academic work, public. Anyone could read it, yes. But only one person used it as the framework for building an American asset network inside Tehran. Only one person structured dead drops and communication protocols based on gaps your mother identified in Iranian counterintelligence. Me. She was talking about me. The mole didn't just compromise Ahmad's extraction, Director Walsh said. They reverse engineered your entire methodology by studying your mother's publicly available scholarship. They knew your playbook because your playbook was built on her work. The light turned green. The SUV moved forward, and I sat in the leather interior of a government vehicle, holding a red folder that contained proof of something I'd never allowed myself to consider. My mother's disappointment hadn't just been wrong. It had been the foundation of everything I'd ever accomplished, and now it was the key to everything that had gone wrong. The Langley corridor stretched ahead of me like a tunnel into everything I'd spent 19 years becoming. Fluorescent lights, beige walls, the particular hum of a building that held more secrets than any library my mother had ever walked through. I'd made this walk 1,000 times, badge in, eyes forward, spine straight against the weight of things I could never say. But tonight the weight felt different. Director Walsh had dropped me at the main entrance with 3 words: find the mole. No timeline, no parameters, no safety net. Just the red folder pressed against my chest and the photograph of Ahmad Rezai burned into my memory, alive when I'd mourned him as dead, betrayed by someone who'd used my own methodology against me, my mother's methodology. The irony tasted like copper in my mouth. The secure conference room on the 4th floor was already occupied. Deputy Director Morrison stood at the head of the table, silver-haired and stone-faced, a man who'd survived 4 administrations by knowing exactly when to speak and when to disappear. Beside him sat Anna Chen from Counterintelligence, her tablet already glowing with data streams I couldn't read from the doorway. And in the corner, barely visible in the shadows, sat a figure I hadn't expected. Ahmad. He looked worse than his photograph. Thinner, older, the kind of aging that came from 90 days of hiding in a country that wanted you dead, while the people who were supposed to protect you read reports claiming you'd already died. His eyes met mine. Something passed between us. Something that didn't need translation. Officer Ashford. Morrison gestured to the empty chair. Sit. I sat. You've reviewed the preliminary findings? I've reviewed what Director Walsh provided. Then you understand the situation. Morrison pressed his palms flat against the table. Someone inside this agency used your operational framework, built on publicly available academic work, to compromise one of our most valuable networks in the Middle East. 3 assets dead, 2 more missing, and Mr. Rezaieh here survived only because he recognized the extraction protocol had been corrupted before the kill team arrived. I turned to Ahmad. How did you know? His voice was rough, accented, the voice of a man who'd spent 3 months trusting no one. The dead drop sequence. You taught me that sequence personally, Penny. You said it was based on gaps in IRGC surveillance, gaps identified by someone who understood their structure better than they understood themselves. My mother. He was talking about my mother. When the sequence changed, I knew. Ahmad leaned forward. The new protocol wasn't built on gaps. It was built on closures. Whoever altered it didn't understand the theory, they only understood the practice. They copied your methods without copying your mind. Anna Chen spoke for the first time. We've traced the corruption to a single terminal, authorized access, high clearance. She turned her tablet toward me. The name on the screen stopped my breath. Richard Ashford, Victoria's husband. The man who'd stood in my mother's doorway 3 hours ago, gin and tonic in hand, dismissing 19 years of my life as government consulting. That's not possible. The words came out flat or automatic. Richard's a corporate attorney. He doesn't have access to... He does. Morrison's voice cut like a scalpel. Through your sister's security consulting firm. Victoria's company has handled contract work for 3 intelligence-adjacent clients over the past 5 years. Standard background checks, nothing operational. But Richard isn't part of her firm. No, but he is married to someone with peripheral access to classified briefings. And he does have clients with significant financial exposure in regions where American intelligence operations have recently failed. The room tilted. I thought about Richard at every family gathering. Richard with his questions about my consulting work. Richard with his careful, casual interest in where I traveled, how long I was gone, what kind of benefits the government provided. I'd thought he was being condescending. He'd been conducting an interrogation. There's more. Anna Chen swiped to a new screen. We've traced the methodology corruption to a specific document. Not your operational files, those remain secure, but a derivative analysis. Someone built a parallel framework based on your mother's published work, mapped it against known outcomes of American operations in the region, and sold the resulting intelligence product to Iranian contacts. Sold. I repeated the word. Richard was selling intelligence. Richard was selling academic analysis with operational implications. Morrison stood. Your mother's book provided the theory, your career provided the proof, and someone with access to both figured out how to monetize the connection. I stared at the screen. My mother's name, my operational record, Richard's terminal access. 3 threads woven into a rope that had strangled everything I'd built. Why come to me? My voice sounded distant, professional. The voice I used in debriefings when the reality of what I was hearing threatened to crack through the surface. You have the evidence. You have Ahmad's testimony. What do you need from me? Morrison and Chen exchanged a look. Because Richard isn't the only target. Morrison sat back down. The intelligence product he sold, the framework connecting your mother's research to operational patterns, it's still circulating. 3 foreign services have already acquired copies, and they're using it to map other American networks built on similar methodological foundations. How many networks? 12 confirmed. Potentially more. 12 networks, dozens of assets, people I'd never met, running operations I'd never heard of, all built on variations of the same intellectual architecture my mother had published 30 years ago. All compromised because someone in my family had figured out the connection. The only person who can identify which networks are vulnerable is someone who understands both sides of the equation. Morrison leaned forward. The academic theory and the operational application, the public scholarship and the classified implementation. You want me to map my own methodology against my mother's work. We want you to save what can be saved. I looked at Ahmad, at the man who'd trusted me with his life, who'd nearly died because someone I shared Christmas dinner with had turned my expertise into a weapon, and Richard, being detained as we speak. Anna Chen's tablet buzzed with an incoming message. Your sister is not taking it well. I worked through the night, worked through the secure terminal glowed blue in the empty office, my office, the one with no windows and no photographs and nothing personal enough to compromise. I pulled my mother's book from the classified reference archive, the same book I'd read at 23, fresh out of Yale, looking for frameworks I could apply to problems the academic world didn't know existed. I'd never told her. Never mentioned that her chapter on IRGC informal networks had shaped the foundation of everything I'd become. Never admitted that her disappointment had driven me to build something she'd never be able to see. Now I read it again with different eyes. Her analysis was brilliant, had always been brilliant. The gaps she'd identified in Iranian counterintelligence, the blind spots created by ideological rigidity, the communication vulnerabilities inherent in parallel power structures, they'd held true for 30 years. They'd also become a map for anyone who knew where to look. Page by page, I cross-referenced her theories against my operational records. Every dead drop location, every communication protocol, every asset recruitment strategy, the patterns emerged like constellations, invisible until you knew the shapes, then obvious, undeniable. My mother had written the playbook, I had implemented it, and Richard had read both. Dawn came gray through the windows I didn't have. I finished the analysis at 0647. 12 networks flagged for immediate review, 8 requiring full protocol changes, 3 already compromised beyond recovery. Ahmad's network had been the first domino. Without intervention, it would have been the first of many. I saved the file, encrypted, transmitted. Then I sat in the blue glow of my secure terminal and let the silence settle. The call came at noon. Not from Morrison, not from Director Walsh, from my mother. I stared at my personal phone, the one I kept in my desk drawer, the one that almost never rang, and watched her name pulse on the screen. 3 rings, 4, 5. I answered on the 6th. Penelope. Her voice sounded ancient, fractured. Victoria called. She said, "Richard." I know. Is it true? Did he... I can't discuss operational details, Mother. I'm not asking about operations. The word caught in her throat. I'm asking about my family, my son-in-law, my daughter's husband. Did he... Yes. Silence. The kind that stretched across 19 years of misunderstanding and pressed down like a physical weight. Because of my work, not a question. She'd already figured it out. Someone used my research to... Your research identified patterns. Someone else exploited them. But you did nothing wrong. I kept my voice even. Professional. The same voice I'd used in 100 debriefings, 1,000 asset meetings. Every moment when showing emotion would have cost someone their life. You published scholarship that advanced the field. What happened afterward wasn't your responsibility, wasn't it? Her voice cracked. I spent 40 years analyzing power structures, Penelope. I wrote books about how information becomes leverage, and I never want... She stopped, steadied herself. I never once applied that analysis to my own family. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Your father used to tell me you were different, not less different. He said you saw things the rest of us missed, angles, patterns, the spaces between what people said and what they meant. She exhaled slowly. I thought he was making excuses for you. I thought he couldn't accept that you'd chosen mediocrity. He knew. What? Dad knew. Not everything, not the details, but he knew I wasn't answering phones. I closed my eyes. He figured it out about 6 years in, the travel patterns, the things I couldn't talk about. He was a diplomat's son. Mother, he understood how silence worked, and he never told me. Silence? You never asked him either. The silence this time was different, heavier, weighted with all the questions she'd never thought to ask, all the assumptions she'd never thought to challenge. Come to dinner. Her voice was barely a whisper. Please, I know I have no right to ask, but come to dinner. I can't or won't. Both. I stood, walked to my window that wasn't there, stared at the wall instead. You spent 19 years building a story about who I was, a story that let you feel disappointed in me, a story that made sense of why your youngest daughter didn't shine the way the others did. Penny, I let you build that story because it protected you, because the truth would have been worse, not knowing where I was, whether I was safe, whether I'd come back from wherever I'd gone. I pressed my palm flat against the beige wall. But I can't sit at your dinner table and pretend the story never existed. I can't act like the past 19 years were just a misunderstanding we can smooth over with roast chicken and civil conversation. Then what can I do? You can let me work. I turned away from the wall. You can accept that I'm not going to explain my career to you. Not now, not ever. You can understand that my silence wasn't weakness, it was the job. And you can decide whether you want a relationship with the daughter you actually have, or whether you'd rather keep mourning the daughter you imagined. The line hummed with distance and decades. I'm sorry. Her voice broke on the words. Penny, I'm so sorry. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. Number one, I sat back down at my terminal. You don't. But I'm not offering forgiveness, Mother. I'm offering information. What you do with it is up to you. I hung up before she could respond. 6 months later, the cafe in Zurich smelled like espresso and old paper. I sat at a corner table, my back to the wall, watching the door the way I'd watched every door for 2 decades. Old habit. Couldn't break it if I tried. The woman who entered wore a gray coat and carried a leather briefcase she ordered in German, sat across from me without asking permission. Officer Ashford. Not anymore. I sipped my coffee. I resigned 3 months ago. I heard. She slid a folder across the table. We'd like to offer you a consulting position. I didn't touch the folder. Who's we? People who value your particular skill set, your understanding of network architecture, your ability to see patterns others miss. You mean my mother's patterns. I mean yours. She met my gaze steadily. Your mother identified theoretical frameworks. You turned them into something operational, something real. The synthesis is uniquely yours, Penelope. Always was. I looked at the folder, thought about Richard, currently awaiting trial in a federal facility, about Victoria, who hadn't spoken to me since the arrest, about my mother, who'd sent 3 letters I hadn't opened and left 7 voicemails I hadn't returned, about Ahmad, back home in Tehran, running new networks built on frameworks that had nothing to do with 30-year-old scholarship. What's the job? Training, analysis, helping the next generation avoid the mistakes that compromised the last one. Teaching, in a manner of speaking. She smiled. Your mother taught theory, you'd teach practice. The application of ideas in environments where getting them wrong costs more than a failing grade. I thought about my mother's classroom at Georgetown. All those students learning about power structures they'd never see up close. All those theories that stayed safely theoretical. I thought about the networks I'd built, the assets I'd run, the lives I'd saved and the lives I'd lost, and the 19 years of silence that had protected everyone except me. I'll read the file. That's all I ask. She stood, buttoned her coat. You know, the irony isn't lost on any of us. The daughter who wasted her education teaching the next generation of intelligence officers how to think. That's not irony. I opened the folder. That's trajectory. She left without another word. I sat in the corner of a Zurich cafe reading about a future I hadn't imagined and let the silence settle around me like an old friend. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. No return address, no postmark. Hand-delivered to my apartment in Geneva by someone who didn't wait for a signature. Inside a single photograph, my mother's sitting room. The mantle I'd stared at during every holiday, every dinner, every moment of measured disappointment. The photographs had been rearranged. And there, in a silver frame at the center between Victoria's wedding portrait and Charles's partnership ceremony, sat a picture I didn't remember being taken. Me, 23 years old, graduation day at Yale, my father's arm around my shoulders. My mother in the background, slightly out of focus, watching us with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Pride, uncertain, unformed, but there, she'd been proud of me once. Before the silence started, before the cover story took hold, before 20 years of disappointment calcified into something that felt like truth. I turned the photograph over, her handwriting shaky but clear. I should have looked harder. I should have asked. I'm trying to learn how. I sat with the photograph for a long time. I thought about calling her, thought about what I'd say, what she'd say, whether 19 years of silence could ever become something else. I thought about the networks I'd built and the ones I'd lost, about Richard's trial and Victoria's grief and my mother's letters I still hadn't opened, about all the things that grew more powerful the quieter they were. Then I put the photograph in my desk drawer next to my old badge and my father's watch and the $34 timepiece I couldn't bring myself to throw away. Some silences can be broken, some just find new shapes. I work in Geneva now, no titles, no plaques, just Penny. I teach analysts how to see patterns, how to build frameworks that adapt, how to protect assets by protecting ideas. My mother's book sits on my shelf. I reference it sometimes, not because I need to, because I want to remember where I started. She emails every few weeks, short messages, questions about nothing important. I answer when I can. We're not healed. We may never be, but we're not finished either. Silence isn't the absence of communication. It's the weight of everything that couldn't be said. And sometimes, if you're patient enough, if you're still enough, if you let the quiet do its work, what couldn't be said finds a way to be heard. I am no longer invisible. I am no longer dismissed. I am just Penny Ashford. And that finally is enough. If you enjoyed this story about the quiet sacrifices that go unseen, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell for more stories just like this one. Thanks for watching.